Welcome to IRO Live with host Bob Bay.
We're going to spend some time in the New Testament. You know, you give somebody a Bible, somebody's new to come to church or a new believer, and you give them a Bible. The first thing people want to do is they want to start in the beginning, and they think, I'm going to start in the beginning. I always say, no, don't start in the beginning. Don't start with Genesis, because by the time you hit Leviticus, you're giving up. Probably even Numbers, you're going to give up in the beginning. I love the book of Genesis. If somebody asked me, Bob, what's your favorite book in the Bible? I would say Genesis. But that's only because I've been studying it for 35 years. It took time for me to be able to appreciate it. What I would normally say is, no, don't start at the beginning. Start in the book of John. Because John talks about love, the love of God. Talks about the love of people. When you're starting out, that's what you need. You need to begin to learn in the beginning that God loves you. And then everything else is built off of that foundation. But here's the thing that I also discovered over the years, is that people start reading the book of John, even though it is simple. John writes it's a very complex, poetic type writing, and he has these really deep ideas that are contained in it. And he writes this poetically, just like you guys know when you're learning the ABCs, you learn A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You just learn better that way. Back in the day, a lot of times authors would write things in kind of a sing-song kind of way so that people could remember things. A lot of people couldn't read. And so it was passed down orally through the people, and that's how the information was disseminated. And so John kind of plays on that, but he also uses a lot of Old Testament references. We're starting in the book of John, 1 John, in the very first verse of John. John is one of the four Gospels. It's the fourth book in the New Testament. John is the fourth Gospel, okay? But the first three are called the Synoptic Gospels. They kind of condense everything. They relate to each other. The stories overlap, but John's kind of got his thing going on all his own. And when you read it, you find out that John was the apostle that Jesus loved. That's the way he's described. The disciple whom Jesus loved. And John was the only apostle who was not martyred. But they tried to kill him. They actually threw him in a pot of boiling oil, and he lived. The rulers of that time were so scared of him, they're like, hey, if you can live through that, there's something special going on here. So that's why they banished him to the Isle of Patmos and put him there, because they knew not to be messing with him. There are some things that I want to talk about to help give a foundation of what is going on in this. And I want to talk about it because it is so important to understand the foundation of what we believe in. You guys, I have been doing this for a long time, and so when I stand here and I sing these songs about all my life you have been faithful, because he has been for so long. And when I say I still have a reason to praise, I know I can stand on that because I was here, an alcoholic meth addict who couldn't hold a job, terrible at relationships, a train wreck. My life was a train wreck. And it went from that to where now here I am all this time later. My kids are growing up. My grandkids are doing well. You can follow Jesus and there could be issues in your family. There's no guarantees as far as that goes. But I can see where God brought me in his faithfulness through all the journey. And so I can stand on that. But in the beginning, it's hard to stand on that. It's hard to know that God's going to take care of things. And the reason why I know that is because in the beginning, when everything was a mess, and I was about to be evicted, and I couldn't keep a job because my boss would look at me cross-eyed. I don't have to stand for this. And I'd get mad and leave. And I was just so dysfunctional, I didn't understand that I could trust and rely on God. It took time to learn that. But it also took time for him to do stuff in me. I'm going to read this first section in the book of John, and I want to talk about it for a minute. And I'm going to break it down enough to where I'm going to try and make you hungry to find out more. And that's my goal in this, is to make you hungry and make you want to read more and say, wow, I didn't think about that. This is what it starts out with in the New King James Version. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. What in the world does all of that mean? But it's actually very poetic and very symbolic. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. That's the first sentence. And the Word was God. Now, what does that mean? We look at it now, and a lot of Christians look at that, and they think, well, they're talking about the Bible. But the New Testament, this part of the Bible, didn't exist then. And so when he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, what they had then was the first 5 books of the Bible. It was called the Pentateuch, the Torah, the law. It was the first part of the Old Testament is what they had. And if you look through it, you could see everything that told of the coming of a Messiah. But he didn't say it right out like that. And so John's trying to get people to think and say, listen, because he's talking to the Jewish people who would have known what the Torah was. They would have known what the law was. They would have known what the books of Moses were. And they would have had an idea. And so he's saying, listen, I know you don't understand about this Jesus guy. Because they knew about God. They didn't know who Jesus was. So he's saying, I know you don't understand about this Jesus guy. In the beginning, like from the very beginning, was the Word. In other words, the story of Jesus was there in the beginning, in the Word that we have. And he was with God. This is what is called Second Temple literature, the time between the Old and the New Testament. That period is referred to as Second Temple time period. He's referring to the second personhood of God, because there is one God. They knew that there was one God, but then they also knew that the Bible spoke of this being that came and revealed himself to Abraham. He revealed himself to Jacob and to different people. And it wasn't God, but who was it? It was God, but it wasn't God. And so they didn't know who Jesus was back then. And if you read in the book of Genesis, it says that the Spirit hovered over the waters. And so the Spirit gave life in the beginning. And so he's trying to bring that in there too, that everything was created through him. And so he's saying, listen, Jesus is the Spirit, and the Spirit is God, and God is the Spirit, and God is Jesus, and Jesus is God. And it was spoken of in the Old Testament in what he's saying in the Word. Can you see how that is, what he's talking about there? What he's laying out, and he's saying. And it says he breathed life into men, and so he's establishing there that God was, and he says it was the light of men. Remember we talked about significance? God gave man significance because animals have a soul, right? Have I talked about this? The animals have a soul, which is your mind, your will, and your emotions, and they have a body. They're 2-part beings. You know, your dog has emotions. All animals have emotions. You can see it. They have a will for sure, and they have a body, but they don't have a spirit. Angels and demons. Angels have a mind, a will, and emotions, and they have a spirit, but they don't have a body. That's why they have to commandeer one. And sometimes God allows us to see into the spirit realm, to see angelic beings, and that's why he says, you may entertain angels and be unaware, because you may be entertaining an angel and not even realize it, because God has allowed that realm to overlap. Because they don't actually have bodies. They do in the spirit realm, but not like we have bodies. Again, he's establishing that thing that we've talked about, that significance of how special we are, how unique we are from all the other creation. And he says, And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. The truth of who Jesus was came into the world. And because of the way man is, and because of the way the world is, we just couldn't understand. You know, the Jews at that time, the children of Israel, believed that when the Messiah came, that he was going to come in bodily form and actually establish his real kingdom. Like set it up. He was going to take over. And so when Jesus came, that's why the way it worked out the way it did. When they were following, you know, when Jesus came into Jerusalem before he was crucified, the whole town went out to meet him. Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. And they were putting down palm branches. You guys know this story? They're putting down palm branches and talking about how great he was and everything. And just a few days later, they're like, crucify him, because they're thinking, this guy ain't going to establish no kingdom. He ain't going to lead the revolt we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for this. We've been put down and brought down by all these other people. The Romans have got us in subjugation all the time, treating us terrible. Everything's awful. And the Messiah is supposed to get us out of this mess. Like for real. This Jesus guy ain't going to do that. He's standing up there in Pilate saying all of this stuff, and he ain't even defending himself. He ain't trying to rally the troops. He ain't trying to get it all together. He ain't trying to make this happen. He's just standing there. Am I being dramatic? He was being peaceful because he knew what was coming, right? He knew that he was going to establish his kingdom. He knew that he was going to do everything that was prophesied of him, but nobody understood what was actually going to happen. Nobody knew it. He was the truth and the light that had come, and nobody knew it. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. That's the children of Israel. The Jewish people didn't receive him. He came to his own. That's what we're saying. They didn't receive him. Some of them did, but he became crucified. But as many received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. To as many as received him, he gave the right to become children of God. To those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. If you guys remember, a couple months ago, we talked about the parable of the sower of the seeds. In Matthew, we talked about it. And he's talking about how the sower of the seeds sowed seeds. Some of it fell on rocky ground. Some of it fell by the wayside. Some of it fell, like on the rocky ground, and it sprung up. But because it didn't have any roots in it, when the sun came out and things got hot, it withered away and died. Some of it fell on good ground, and it grew and produced 30, 60, 90-fold. Jesus was the seed. He refers in another place, and he says, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it cannot grow up and produce more. And that's what he's saying. He was that grain that was sowed. He is that seed that was sown. And if you receive it, your spirit is woken up. Remember me talking about the spirit in your car? Me talking about your spirit and your soul and your body is your car. Your body, the physical body is your car. And your soul, which is your mind, your will, and emotions. So you spend your whole life learning how to drive this car around and how to operate and do things. And that's where you get your coping skills from. That's where you get the ability, like, I know if I talk to Pam in a certain way and I rub her cheek. But you know what? She knows if she talks to me in a certain way, rubs my cheek. My oldest daughter, if she wanted to go to McDonald's to get a Happy Meal, she knew she just had to look at me in a certain way and bat her eyes. And Pam would always say, stop looking at your dad with a Happy Meal face. Because she knew. I'd melt. I'd melt if she looked at it. That's a coping skill. Yeah. You get the Happy Meal. But the problem is when you grow up, the Happy Meal stop working. So then you smoke crack. No, that's terrible. My daughter did not smoke crack. But no, that's what ends up happening. The coping skills stop working, and so you end up replacing them as you grow up. It stops working, and so you develop new coping skills. I was talking about driving in this car and our soul making all of those decisions because our spirit is in sleep mode. It's in a coma, and it can't commune with God to help us make those decisions as we ought to. We're left to our mind, our will, and our emotions, which is flawed because of the world we live in and because of the lessons that we learn. And death happens. The result of all of that is death. Our spirit has to be made alive, and that's what he's talking about here. Your spirit is made alive. You receive the seed and you're made alive. Your spirit comes to life. You feel different. Right? And so you start feeling different. You think, this is incredible. Hope begins to bloom in your heart again. And you're like, this might work. God might actually really love me. The enemy comes just like in the parable of the sower to try and steal that away from you. The hardships of the world come and try and burn that out of you, that seed. But the power is because Jesus came and won the battle and established his kingdom. That's the real power and the authority. It's not about us. It's not about us trying to overcome those coping mechanisms. It's not about us sitting and being locked in this ever-spinning cycle of dysfunction and not knowing how to get out of it and how to break the cycle. It's not up to us. And it goes on to talk about not the will of man. It's not our will that will do it. It's not our wanting, it's not our being good enough. It's none of that's going to do it. It's all about Jesus and what he did for us. Because this is the whole plan and purpose of God. You see throughout the word that it talked about back then. Okay, he sent the Old Testament law to try and help us through, but then that failed miserably, so he had to go with the backup plan, which was Jesus. And then Jesus came and they ended up crucifying him, but woohoo, believe in him, you get to go to heaven. Was not the plan. The plan all along was, I am going to reestablish my relationship with mankind. This is God. I am going to reestablish my relationship with mankind on earth as it is in heaven in my kingdom. He had it all planned out from the beginning, and you can see it play out. We talked about it in the Exodus out of Egypt, in the journey through the wilderness, the journey into the promised land. It's all played out and over in so many different ways. It played out his plan, not so that you could die and go to heaven. That's a small part of it, to have eternal life. But what he wants is to have a relationship with us, for us to become his children. All we have to do is just receive that seed, believe in what Jesus did, and he will reparent us, rework in us. We can't be good enough. I can tell you, we cannot be good enough. But he'll work in us to make us new creations, to make us new people. All we have to do is hold on to him and don't let go. The hard part is holding on to him and not turning and running away like our hair's on fire. I ain't got much hair to burn. Maybe my hair's been on fire too long. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. We have to just hold on to him and let him do what he's going to do. But the problem is like I've talked about before, we let go because everything in us wants to run our lives the way we've always done it, wants to use those coping mechanisms to make us not feel the way we feel or to feel different, to achieve this. If I could just feel like this all the time, everything would be okay. If you've dealt with substance abuse, you know that you're always chasing the high. And then the high is not the high anymore. Then it's just normal. You're just trying to get normal, right? trying not to be dope sick. You're just trying to feel normal. And that's not what God intends for us to walk in. And so all we have to do is just hold on to him. And when things get hard, when we feel like giving up, when we feel like letting go, when we feel like doing things the way we want them to do, when we see the shiny objects around us and we try and grab for them, we let go of him to grab for the shiny objects. And we find out it's just aluminum foil. It's not silver and gold. But what do we do when that happens? We drop that stuff and we run back to him. God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I let go again. Here I am. I'm back, God. I'm back. But we have to just hold on. We have to hold on. The quicker we let go, the less our grip is. We have to keep holding on. And the longer we hold on, the more our grip increases and our strength increases. And so the longer we hold on this time will mean the longer we can hold on next time. But here's the real secret thing is, even when we let go and we fall, as long as we get back up, we have a responsibility to get up. But when we get up, we just lift up our hands and God picks us up. Lift up your hands and God will pick you up.
Thanks for listening. Please comment and subscribe for upcoming podcasts. To order your copy of My Real Life, go to the Take Action page at our website, reallifeministries-stl.com, or go to Real Life Ministries STL on Facebook.